Hey guys, welcome to the MC Anime Podcast. We cover anime, geek culture, Japanese aesthetics, and Asian studies. We are a multi-fandom podcast, and you can expect to hear topics in your favorite hobby or fandom activity potentially. You can find MC Anime on Google Podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Also, please check out mcanimepodcast.com, our website. Furthermore, stay tuned in for another episode.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of MC Anime. MC here, and today we have another special episode. So, with 4th of July happening and fireworks and big bangs go off, we think of, the celebration what fireworks bring, New Year's, Independence, the big colorful firecrackers up in the sky that brings really colorful designs and, can be very expensive for a fireworks display when you guys do such display and attract a large attention from miles away. So further ado, let's do, fire ignites our dreams and our anxieties. It speaks to us in the language more than basic thought. Our instincts respond to the flicker of the flame, to the wavering colors of the coals, to the roar of the conflagration. The fire needs oxygen, fuel, and heat. It needs an inhibitor, a tiny bit of burning metal struck to the white heat by friction against flint, the spark. The heat of the spark rips upon molecules of fuel, carbon and hydrogen atoms combine with oxygen. The reactions are exothermic. They give off the heat to unite more fuel, which we call a chain reaction. The complex process remains something of a mystery to science even today. We understand roughly what is happening, but the flame appears to have a life of its own. Its energy burns out as heat, which makes particles of soot inconsistent. So, that's what fireworks come into play. So it does not exist anywhere in nature. It's artificial fire. Terms for what we call fireworks, pyrotechnics. Environment is gunpowder. Artificial fire requires an oxidizer, a chemical that emits oxygen when heated. You mix the oxidizer with the fuel, grit it until the ingredients are intimate connected, and then the saltpeter, which is the oxidizer, which is the fuel, the combination of charcoal and sulfur. As the fuel burns, it decomposes the saltpeter, releasing the virgin oxygen. The oxygen accelerates the burning, a process technically called deflagration. You created gunpowder. So the substance that's become known as gunpowder was not invented for the gun. Before gunpowder's inception, no one had convinced of a projectile throwing machine driven by chemical energy. Humans developed tools for using this new material only if it had emerged from the fantastical speculation of alchemists. Only through centuries of trial and error did gunpowder reveal its properties and possibilities. So that is how gunpowder was, came to be in the early days. And today's particular topic is Asian studies, gunpowder, and fireworks. So, take as we do a deep dive into the process to make gunpowder work and how gunpowder basically changed how we do things in warfare and rockets and other types of ignition type processes. So, we go to the mountaintops of western China. Legendary semi-human monsters called Shan peeked through the leaves of the campfires of travelers. When men were away, the naked creatures snuck close to the stairs of salt to roast frogs and crabs over the flames. If confronted head-on, the Shun would inflict their assailants with fight fever. The best way to drive these ogres off was to throw bamboo into the fire. The expanding air and steam inside the plant segments and air pressure burst the twigs with a loud snap. Endless matter of the superstitious travelers created a little explosion. A wood whose Latin roots were meant to drive by clapping. All mammals are equipped with a startle reflex, a primitive brain circuit that makes them tense, jump, cringe in response to a loud noise. The Chinese assume that Shun reacted the same way. So, the early noisemakers were used from prehistoric times and became a common amusement. On New Year's Day in China, the crack of exploding bamboo frightened away evil spirits and claimed the way for the upcoming year. Exploding bamboo was still popular when Marco Polo brought home his wondrous account of Cataway in 1995. Young green canes thrown into the fire burn with such a dreadful noise that it can be heard from a mile away. 10 miles at night, he claimed, and anyone who was not used to it could easily go into a swoon or even die. His description reminds us of how quiet the medieval world was. No motorized vehicles or amplified music to disturb the sleep. Thunder was the loudest noise anyone had ever heard. Even war was relatively quiet, limited to the pounding of drums, the shouts of combatants, and the clank of weapons. From over the next hill, of a battle would dissolve into a whisper. During the 10th century AD, a new instrument for making noise came into being, one for being a unique mixture of ingredients. A medieval Chinese text with the fantastical title Dreams of the Glories of the Eastern Capital describes a day that the Chinese army mounted for the emperor around AD 1110. The spectacle opened with a noise like thunder and continued into the night. And as a result, with fireworks exploding against the blackness of the medieval night, dancers in strange costumes followed, moving through clouds and colored smoke. The substance that produced these sensational effects would have a singular impact on societies around the world, and yet the material entered history slowly, tentatively, emerging out of centuries of happenstance, observation, trial, and error. Only gradually did men understand that they were dealing with something genuinely new on Earth. It was a combination of saltpeter, sulfur, and charcoal, ground lavishly together in the right proportions. The Chinese called it Yuho Yaho, or the fire drug. Totemism was the catalyst for the radical new technology. The system of thought introduced by Lao Tzu in the 6th century AD BC began as a new purely psychological discipline, but a latter branch of the tradition absorbed the magical beliefs of early folkways and integrated a mixture of sorcery, superstition, and extraterrestrial knowledge. Taoist interest in magical manipulations became established as Chinese alchemy. Alchemy contributed these critical elements to the discovery of the fire drug, purification, observation, and experiment. This fire drug also was known as the early fireworks. Chinese alchemists later to rid of adulterates, the substance they found in nature. Purity was a sacred quality residing a right. Even a small amount of contamination in the fire drug's ingredients would derail the combustion reaction. Alchemists puzzled over how the 5 basic elements of the natural world, metal, wood, earth, water, and fire, could interact to produce the manifold universe. They took notes of quirks, such as quickness of combustion that might have been otherwise escaped tension, observed, they experimented. While not a scientific in the modern sense, There was systematic trial and error and enabled to grope into the unknown. In the West, alchemy focused on ways of transforming base substances into gold. In contrast, the principal aim of Chinese practitioners were to create an elixir of immortality. Their interest was drawn by materials with paradoxical properties: gold, the element that never tarnished; mercury, the liquid metal; sulfur, the stone that burned. Was it possible that these materials held a secret of perpetual youth? Tacitus alchemists conducted centuries-long search to find the proper combination. The emperors themselves were acceptable to the allure of their potions. The capable Tang dynasty, Emperor Li Cheng, who ruled from AD 806 to 820, was one of the seven who fell under the influence of the alchemists. Hoping to live forever, Li became an introvert of the consumer of the elixirs. Problem with known strums was that many of the exotic ingredients like white lead and chemical regula or arsenic sulfide were deadly poisons. The ingestion of mercury, a favorite ingredient, alteration of the gums, fever, bloody, vomiting, burning pains, and muscle tumors. It also affects the mind, disturbing the senses. So, coroners might have been disconcerted to observe the uproar. This was Iliad's fate. He was warned by his posthumous minister that they have come for nothing but profit. The minister was denoted. The emperor perished in his folly, became decreasingly erratic till he be assassinated by the court churches. So, and with that, some have heated together sulfur, regular, and saltpeter with honey. Smoke and flames result, so that their hands and faces have been burnt. Even the whole house where they were working burned down. The casual warning marks on an epoch in human history. It was the debut of artificial fire on Earth, the whispered beginning of the long and mysterious history of gunpowder. Alchemists had stumbled across a clue to the magical effects of which saltpeter was capable when mixed with sulfur and a source of carbon, in this case dried honey. They had created a material with a startling new relation to fire. It was not yet true fire drug, the explosive that would be commonly known around the world as gunpowder, but the observant and inquisitive alchemists began searching for the key to immortality, had taken an important step in a dramatic new direction. Saltpeter became the essential component of the fire drug, otherwise known as nidester. The salt was readily available in China as white crust on certain soils. Alchemists had studied its qualities for centuries. They mixed it with water to form a weak nitric acid solution which they had to dissolve otherwise insoluble materials. In areas where table salt was short supply, cooks sometimes used saltpeter to enhance the flavor of food. They no doubt noticed that when a pinch was thrown to the fire, it caused fires to flame up. The alchemy manuals from the Tang Dynasty mention saltpeter in its preparation. The production of relatively pure saltpeter was part of the alchemist's recipe. Saltpeter is a waste product of two strands of bacteria that are among the many feasts on decaying organic matter. These enterprising microorganisms, which is the nitrosamous and the nicobacter, are friends to the organic gardener, transforming the raw materials of rot into the nitrates plants love. So, in the nitrate radical that's the crux of the saltpeter, 3 oxygen atoms are fastened to one of the nitrogen. The unit forms salts in which whatever metals are available, such as calcium, sodium, or potassium, the last being most valuable for making gunpowder. So potassium nitrate is very favorable in the gunpowder industry. for the simple fact that it's very explosive, very combustible, and does a very steady fire. The most suitable of all salts, saltpeter dissolves into rainwater, which soaks into the earth, and is wickered upward by evaporation. All of the materials solidify fast, leaving the nitrates to concentrate on the surface. Southern China's hot climate, accompanied by the alternate rainy and dry seasons, promoted both rapid decay and speedy evaporation. In some places, the conditions yielded crude saltpeter that could be extracted from the top layer of the soil. What made saltpeter the essence of the fire drug was the property already observed by Chinese cooks. When exposed to the heat of 35 degrees centigrade, the normally stable salt breaks down, letting loose the oxygen atoms that have been bound up with nitrogen. The key mechanism of artificial fire was the release of the virgin oxygen, when it became available to burn any surrounding fuel. How much saltpeter is to include in the mixture was a matter that could only be worked out through long trial and error. 3/4 by weight would typically emerge as the ideal proportion early fire drug, containing lesser amounts burned vigorously but did not explode. All that was needed to complete the formula was a readily available fuel. The flare-up of the dangerous elixir may have been pointed the way. Alchemists have been known to sulfur's fiery potential. One of the few elements to exist in pure state in nature, sulfur could be found deposited near volcanoes, or can be obtained by heating pyrite ores and allowing the sulfurous vapors to solidify on the cool walls of a container. The other fuel added to the mix was charcoal, which had long been used as a source of heat. The remains of wood have been cooked in oxygen-poor environment. Charcoal is a complex ingredient that consists of pure carbon laced with volatile hydrocarbons and other remnants of the organic source. These chemicals, along with charcoal's lattice-like structure, play a subtle but crucial role in the action of gunpowder that scientists to this day do not completely understand. Powdered coal and granite, while almost pure carbon, lack these additions and will not make effective gunpowder. So saltpeter, sulfur, and charcoal rely on a unique and intricate teamwork to bring out the magic associated with the fire drug. Sulfur reacts first to the introduction of heat from a spark or flame. The yellow material ignites at a relatively low temperature, 200 centigrade degrees. Its burning generates additional heat that ignites the charcoal and shatters the saltpeter. Releasing the stone of oxygen, the pure oxygen hurries the ignition of more fuel. Charcoal burns at a higher temperature than sulfur, emitting abundant thermal energy to accelerate the reaction further. Any burning substance generates a quantity of gases that take up more space than the fuel itself. When gunpowder ignites, these gases are created in the instant, and the heat of the reaction makes them expand enormously. The rapid generation of hot gas produces all the effects of the fire drug. These chemical details, of course, were known to at the time. The discovery of oxygen lay almost 1,000 years into the future. Chinese chemists devised theories from their own conception of universal dynamics, which viewed the world as a system of balanced dualities. Yin represents the passive, cool female principle. Yang, the active, hot male. These interactions between the two generate the phenomenon and transformations observed in the world. Saltpeter is the prince, and sulfur is the minister, according to a 16th century Chinese history text. Their mutual dependence is what gives us their usefulness. Another document. Is extremely negative or monarch. Munish. Sulfur is extremely positive and sunny. That's it extroverse. When the two supernatural elements yin and yang meet each other in extremely close, the resulting explosion will stun every soul and shadow everything around it. So as we can see, the warning about the exploding elixir, practitioners viewed the fire drug as a dangerous mistake. It didn't fit the usual domestic functions of fire like cooking, lighting, and providing heat. It was an oddity to be avoided. For the moment, alchemists lacked the tools to put the accidentally discovery at work. When united, uncontained, gunpowder burns with a soft whoomp and a burst of fire, leaving behind a cloud of dense, white smoke, a magician's effect. This was perhaps the earliest adaptation in China. Rather than heed warning of its dangers, alchemists may have spied an opportunity for parlor tricks that would mystify their audiences. The ceremonial entertainment value of fire was highly esteemed in China, and the fire drug offered a myriad of possibilities for the creative interpostio. Pyrotechnics was the first field in which the magical new substance found a use. Ignition translates gunpowder's stored chemical energy into the thermal energy of flame and mechanical energy of the compressed gases. Simple tools, containers of one sort or another, are needed to detect the energy and put it to work. It's likely that fireworks craftsmen designed the four basic forms of containment that have been dictated all the uses of gunpowder from medieval China down to our time. First, enclose the container, the powder in a container, seal except for a fuse, and the gas generates enormous pressure, enough to blow the vessel apart. Sounds similar to crackling of rockets. The tougher the container, the greater the energy accumulates, and the more violent the explosion. The sound of a firecracker results from the fire and tearing open of the paper under pressure and the expectation of the expansion of the gas inside. A bomb is a container in which a much harder shell, not a firecracker. Next, pack the powder into a tube with one open end. The combustion products fly out into a fiery spray. Pyrotechnic artists use the effect to produce spectacular fountains of fire. Bamboo offered convenient cylindrical containers for early gunpowder devices. These fire tubes were later the basis of some of the earliest gunpowder weapons. When the gases rushed from these tubes, users felt a force pushing in the opposite direction. By accident or design, they began to put this force to work. The burning powder now drove the tube forward, rubbing into the third basic tool, the rocket. The origin of the rocket is suggested by an incident in 1264 when the Emperor Li Sun hosted a feast in the palace hall in honor of his mother, Khan Xin. During the festival fireworks show in the courtyard, the pyrotechnicians ignited ground rats, small tubes that skirt around the force of burning of the fire drug. Over was scattered wildly across the floor and up steps of the throne, frightening the Empress Mother severely. Insert the powder once more into a tube, one end open. On top of it, the rest, an object that completely fills its opening. When the powder burns, the expanding gases heave the object out the end. Under the right conditions, the tool efficiently converts the powder's chemical energy to mechanical force. The projectile bursts out at a high rate of speed. This is the fourth and most controversial of all the applications of the fire gun, the fire drug, which is the gun, firearms. So they found a projectile with force, with gunpowder to make bullets and the gun reality. Shocking how that became to be. A deep-rooted misconception in the West holds that the Chinese never used gunpowder for war. They employed one of the most potent inventions in the history of mankind for idle entertainment and children's whiz-bangs. This perceived wisdom is categorically false. The notion of China's beyond relationship with gunpowder sprang in the part of Russian prejudice about the Chinese character. Some viewed the Chinese as diplomats who stood upon the sacred of gunpowder but couldn't envision its potential. Others saw them as pacifist sages who wisely turned away from destructive abilities. Confusing the matter was a long-time convention that the origins of gunpowder in China went back as 100 BC. New inventions are often saddled with the names of existing technology. The Chinese word that designated exploding bamboo was as well as to gunpowder firecrackers, that of initially arrows to rockets. This practice can falsely suggest ancient origins, incorrectly dating the discovery of gunpowder 1,000 years too early gave the impression that centuries had passed before the Chinese developed gunpowder weaponry. The fact that the Chinese military authorities quickly grew interested in the fire drug, and for a good reason. The cheapest development of gunpowder has taken place. China was facing a prolonged and unprecedented military threat. The Song empires, who took power in AD 960, ruled over a dynasty that culturally one of the most robust in all of Chinese long history, but militarily one of the most valuable. It was during the Song era that the fire drug became established as a major accomplishment of human technology. Song officials instituted a merit system based on rigorous testing to fill important government posts. They initiated land reform and equitable taxation. Cities flourished. The original capital had 3 times the population of Rome in its glory. A later capital, Hong-Ho, was more than 1 million inhabitants, starting Marco Polo, his native Venice, the one of the largest cities in Europe, boasted only 50,000 citizens. Movable type and the application of the compass to navigation were among the many technical advances of the Song era. The people of China are the most skillful of men in handicrafts. No other nation approaches them in this, but these technical and cultural achievements unfolded against a background of military conflict. Tribes from the interior of Asia, mounted barbarians who had worried Chinese borders for centuries, were increasingly passing right into the empire. The reign of the Song emperors was the end and complete subjugation of the country by foreigners. High culture and technical ingenuity, pressuring need to combine Song artisans to investigate the fire drug with a sense of both fascination and patriotic fervor. 1044, the Song Emperor Tenso received from his adjunct a document, collection of the most important military techniques. 2 recipes for making fire drug that could be used and conceptually bombs to be thrown by siege engines. A 3rd mixture was intended as fuel for poison smoke bombs. All were low in saltpeter, which meant that the poison smoke bombs led to rapid combustion, not explosion, from the effects. They were the first practical formulas for gunpowder anywhere in the world. Fire starting was an obvious jumping-off point for gunpowder technology, and these mixtures for nearly into the long Chinese tradition of incendiary warfare. Areas have been turned into incendiary weapons by attaching packets of burning pitch or other flammable material into shafts. Container gunpowder would create a much more vigorous and stubborn fire when it hit the target. AD 969, during the early years of the Song dynasty, a man named Yo I-feng received a gift of silk for developing a new kind of fire arrow, probably including gunpowder. By 1086, the Chinese were producing gunfire fire arrows by the tons of thousands. To make the weapons, workers wrapped paper around gunpowder in a lump like pomegranate, attached it to the shaft of the arrow, and sealed it with pine resin. The archer would lift a fuse projecting it from the mass of powder before launching the arrow. Perforated metal balls charged with gunpowder and equipped with hooks soon cooked the towers, ladders, and buildings where they sprayed fire, igniting the structures. Catapults were used to hurl these accessories. The range was short, less than 150 feet, but the hissing, fire-spitting ball made a fearsome weapon. When Emperor Jin reviewed the report of cataloging the unconventional weaponry, he may have grown concerned about the proliferation of the fire drug. Short time after, he forbade the export of saltpeter and sulfur. He soon banned all private trade in these strategic ingredients, turning war gunpowder into a state monopoly. Soon technicians were all investigating the military possibilities of gunpowder. 1126, the task took on a new urgency. The September of that year, Jurchens, a wild semi-nomadic tribe from north of Korea, without written language or calendar, descended on the Chinese laying siege on Kaifeng. The Sung warriors used their gunpowder arrows to defend the city, firing down the walls of the enemy. In the 80 years since they had recorded the first use for mulas, some technicians had discovered a new use for the magical substance, the first explosive bombs. To fashion these bundles of explosive from traditional materials like bamboo or paper wrapped with string, they probably borrowed the idea from the fabrication of fireworks. The bombs, that were in fact little more than large firecrackers. Fire drug was still very too low in saltpeter to burst stronger cations. The purpose in which military men put the bombs were also similar to what firecrackers might achieve: to startle, frighten, and confuse the enemy. Song soldiers tossed these thunderclap bombs from the remnants of Kaifeng, hitting the lines of the enemy and throwing them into great confusion. Containing 3 or 4 pounds of weak gunpowder each, the devices left a resonant boom, an enormous billow of smoke. Many fled, hollering with fright, but no fire arrows or frightening noisemakers could stay the onslaught of the Jurchens. In January of 1127, the Sung Emperor surrendered his capital to the barbarians. The Jurchens carried the Son of Heaven north, dressed him in a servant's livery, reduced him to the status of a commoner, and forced him to live the rest of his life in exile. The sudden collapse of Sun power stunned the Chinese. The Jurchens swept into northern China, established the Qing dynasty. They readily adopted many Chinese customs by 1150. They were making saltpeter artificially in manicure heaps. The Sung Chinese crowned a new emperor who retreated to the south with his. He continued the dynasty, only relinquishing huge tracts of land and paying regular tribute to the Jurchen neighbors. More trouble was brewing. Among the many bands of nomads who roamed the steppes of Asia, there was a furious but absurd tribe known as the Mongols. 1206, after uniting diverse Mongol factions, A young man named Chinni was exalted by his followers and given the title Genghis Khan, the supreme commander. Man's highest joy, he declared, is the victory to conquer one's enemies, to pursue them, to derive them of their possessions, to make their beloved weep. Genghis Khan would make many weep. Intentionally, the Mongols swept to the west, invading India, Persia, the Caucasus, all of Central Asia, and threatening even distant Europe. After Genghis died in 1227, his son Onigani turned his attention to the east. The Joseon during this century they had ruled northern China, had assimilated into the more advanced culture of those subjects. The Qin dynasty now fell victim to an army of mountain horsemen, even more fearsome than their own ancestors. The Qin had learned the secrets of the Chinese gunpowder and adopted them as their own. 1231, when the Mongols attacked, powder makers had developed a formula rich enough in saltpeter that its explosion could burst an iron casing. The Qin and this heaven-shaking thunderclash bomb to defend Kaifeng against the invaders. The explosion of the Black Bluster, a witness related he heard 33 miles away and scorched an area 40 yards square. The shrapnel ripped apart the iron armor. The Mongols tried to protect their sapling trenches by using cowhide covers, but the defenders lowered a thunder crash bomb on a chain. The attacking soldiers were all blown to bits, and a mage colonel noted, not even a trace without being left behind. The bombs were frightening indeed, but the point was no longer just to scare the enemy. The desperate chain defenders tried to turn to another gunpowder device borrowed from the Chinese subjects, a spear or pike with a 2-foot-long tube attached to it. Below the point, this container of bamboo, of tightly wrapped paper, was what we call was packed full of the fire drug. A soldier lit the mixture and pointed at the enemies, spewing flame and sparks so far as 6 feet. The eruption lasted 5 minutes. The lances were found to be the best of all fire weapons. They were exceptionally useful to defending city walls. These thunder crash bombs and flying fire spears were the only 2 weapons that the Mongol soldiers were really afraid of. Not afraid of. The Mongols defeated the Qin and ended their reign in China. The Song Chinese, who ruled a large and wealthy kingdom, must have known that their turn would soon come, but they failed prepared for the onslaught. 1257, government officials complained that Song arsenals were roughly lacking in up-to-date weapons, especially iron bombs and fire arrows. The warnings were not heeded. Genghis' grandson, Kublai Khan, attacked China in 1274, quickly reducing the entire nation to the appendage of the vast Mongol Empire. Like the juggernauts before them, the Mongols were eager to make one of the prophecy of Chinese military technicians and craftsmen. They adopted the fire drug weapons and encouraged their continued development, but they never viewed the radical technology as a replacement for the potent cavalry techniques in which they had conquered half of the world. Gunpowder remained a novel supplement for the traditional ways of making war. On at least one occasion, they got a taste of the volatile and unpredictable nature of the new substance. 1280, Mongol officials dispensed the Chinese workers who had been operating a gunpowder arsenal. The locals had fallen under suspicion owing to their contagious and deceitful behavior and been replaced by Mongols, but they understand nothing of the handling of materials. As a result, the arsenal exploded, with much loss of life, It was an incident that, though the Mongols were actively trying to adopt the new weapon, they still had much to learn. Chinese engineers continued to develop gunpowder technology in spite of the danger. The increasingly powerful bombs were pointless to their users as well to the makers. Having them into a catapult have strained the nerves of the crew, who would not be sure of the launching of the bomb before it exploded. Timing was critical. The bomb had to be long enough, have enough fuse to keep burning until it reached the target, but not so much that it could be extinguished or tossed back by the enemy. Though in the 13th and 14th century, these bombs became common implements of war in China. The names were fearful in themselves: dropping from heaven bomb, match for 10,000 enemies bomb, bandit burden vision confusion magic fireball. One nasty device is known the bone burning and bruising fire oil magic bomb. Contained pellets of iron and shards and porcelain coated with a stew of tongue oil, urine, salt, amniotic feces, and succulent juice. The bomb was guaranteed to wound the skin, bones, blind enemies, even knock birds out of the air. Both the names and the exotic ingredients indicate that the element of magic continued to be attached to the fire drug weapons. Rockets also joined the arsenal and were the most technically demanding gunpowder tools. With a firecracker or bomb, designers wanted the powder to burn as quickly as possible, generating an explosive burst of gases. A rocket required a regulated ignition that continued to provide thrust to the tube flew through the air. The technicians found that gunpowder, when packed very tightly in a tube, only burned from the surface to provide the denser powder. The enlarged surface area generated enough hot gases to lift the rocket skyward. Finally, they had to invent a restricted opening that would channel those burning gases for more power. The result of the tube was gunpowder that could soar through the air and deliver an initial package on a distant target. Rockets probably began to use in war in the middle of the 13th century. As revolutionary as these rockets and bombs and incendiary weapons were, Chinese technicians were soon working on an even more controversial tool, the gun. As they learned to make the gunpowder increasingly explosive, they saw new possibilities in the fire lance, the handheld flamethrowers that had been long since standard weapons. They found that the rush of gunpowder could carry with bits of metal and crockery the flying debris, further injured and disturbed enemy soldiers. Weapons makers began to substitute metal tubes for bamboo. This allowed them to use a more powerful powder and to shoot a fiercer flame. A bandit striking penetrating lance had a squat yard-long iron bill with 2-foot stock attached to the butt end. Over the years, the fire lances grew even larger. Armed with one, a soldier could blast at an enemy 6-foot tongue of flame, equated by the nasty spray of medical splinters and broken porcelain. Eventually, the devices became too cumbersome for one man to handle. Engineers attached them to wooden frames or two-wheeled carriages. While not as versatile as the handheld version, these weapons have been more called eruptors, would have presented an awful surprise to a hand of marauders trying to scale a city, wall, or assault its gates. What's more is using the lances to hold missiles. The technicians were approaching a truly revolutionary breakthrough. Gradually, the projectiles became more crucial to the effectiveness of the weapon than the flames themselves. Some eruptors shot bottles of arrows. One came in a magazine that dropped lead balls into the fire chamber to be spewed forth from another. This weapon was said to be able to resist the assault of 50 soldiers. A 9-arrow heart-piercing magic poison thunderous fire eruptor speaks for itself. Weapons developers noted that the more closely the projectiles came to filling to the diameter of the lance's barrel, the more forcefully they would fly from the mouth. Powder makers devised formulas richer in saltpeter. The explosive powder threw the projectiles even further. It blew up the whole affair on occasion, pointing to the need for stronger tubes fashioned from the thicker metal. 13th century came to a close with the Mongols still in control of China. The evolution of the fire lance resulted in an entirely new implement. Instead of using the flames of constantly fire directly, it harnessed fire drug's potential for throwing projectiles. This was the first gun. For military technicians of the time, the new device was a logical variation on earlier weapons. From the broader perspective of mankind's endless quest for instruments of violence, it was one of the most monumental developmental in history. In truth, the fire was secondary. The powder was a fuel, a source concentrated on energy. The energy was put into use indirectly, the real work being done by the projectile. The earliest guns appeared in China in the late 1200s. The oldest extant had can intensely dated to 1288. The gun arrived in evolutionary steps, just as the Chinese gunpowder weapons had. The earliest was small, crude variations on the fire lance. A Chinese bronze head cannon, 1332, is only a foot long and weighs 8 pounds. Hundreds of large military pieces have survived from the 1350s. They fired both stone and iron balls. An account of 1359 battle near Hasanku, which had become a leading gunpowder producing city, already take the use of firearms for granted. The Ming Chinese were then challenging their Mogul leaders. Both sides were well equipped with cannon, sometimes firing dozens in organized salvos. By 1412, the long-range awe-inspiring cannon, almost 3 feet long, used a half a pound of fire powder to do a 2-inch ball at high velocity. Alternatively, it would shoot a bag of half-inch lead pellets. The cannon took its place to a tool in the vast arsenal of the Chinese military. Engineers added improvements over the years. The weapon's effect, though, was far from revolutionary. It's another another tool for using the fire drug, but the concept was about to travel to a land where it would create a far more profound effect, where it would not just serve as an instrument of war, but upset an entire society and radically the course of history. The thundering noise. We take it to France. So, the introduction of gunpowder and one of the uses for firecrackers and projectiles were very influential in Chinese history. The 4 uses for the saltpeter, charcoal, and sulfur formula of gunpowder. One was fireworks, one was lances, one was a gun, one was a cannon. All these different uses are very critical of the firecracker itself. The firecracker being the rocket also is where we get firecrackers today. They will release the pressure, build up the pressure so you can have the explosion, and the pressure releasing all the gases while uniting the firecracker with the fire drug. So it's important to note that even if the fire drug, being as expensive as it was, still proved to be very deadly and had very large caution by the military. It's important to note, with the invention of the gunpowder, radically changed the world. It's one of the 4 great inventions of China, others being paper, the compass, and other types. But gunpowder radically changed what is China and warfare. Both are directly connected. The early forms of Chinese warfare were influential in defending cannons, salvos, and different fire arrows. So the instruments that had lances, the arrows, pikes, and lances, and then barrels, and then firecrackers are all revolutionary in the different uses and also the different concentrations of saltpeter. The poison smoke bombs is another one that used less saltpeter but made it more potent for the smoke to spread. So it would die out more, but when it was fused, the poison would go out into the smoke, and you inhale the smoke, you inhale the poison. So that's one use that the gunpowder was used. Firecrackers or fireworks. Well, firecrackers are also projectiles, not by cannon base or gun, but their own projectile. And they would shoot it on arrows to get profound effect into long distance warfare. Because usually the only long distance warfare was like spikes or arrows without fire being added to it. Don't forget the invention of the catapult, also drawing huge amounts of fire at the enemy. This allowed a really good burning than just lighting something on fire and then shoot it out. You can actually launch it and then it's burning as it goes over there, instead of burning it while trying to capitalize it in the catapult. And as all and crazy as fireworks can be, truly fire mages and alchemists use the fire drug to amaze the populace and the entertainment value that fireworks bring. When you think of fire, you think of destruction, but you also think of awe. Fireworks today is very revolutionary in displays of glory, patriotism, celebration, festivals, associated with the new year to bring new rebirth. And also, people love seeing the display of fire at work in a less destructive way than guns and cannons and projectiles, even in awe when you go up into space. Fire has allowed so many advances in society. Power, rockets being firecrackers and projectiles going up or going across. Chinese worked for centuries to develop this technology and continue the monopoly of saltpeter and sulfur, because of the simple fact what they had of the fire drug was very influential and powerful. Just as the fire alchemists used the fire drug in different ways for the entertainment and weapon warfare that it had, it was constantly a double-edged sword. For the simple fact that you had to learn how to tame the fire in order to have the fire act in the way you want it to use in the war. Because if you're not careful, the fire can unite on you, making it very cumbersome for the people making it and the people firing it. So trial and error is the only way that during this time people were able to figure out what gunpowder did, the devices to use gunpowder for, and how to take the gunpowder invention, turn it into a weapon and a tool against the people oppressing you in fights and battle. And when gunpowder, or the fire drug, was introduced to Europe, it dramatically changed the culture of warfare. Because of the invention of the gun and being directly involved in how war was done, it dramatically changed how you do it. You can shoot people, you can do people from a distance with a projectile. Most of these tamboons were just metal and porcelain. They were effective enough for debris to fire with the bomb with the explosion that the gun made. And it had a high effect for the irritant to the skin and other chemical warfare as well. Not only did the gunpowder allow projectiles to fire, they also did biological warfare with poison and sometimes viruses and other stuff. Because an explosion, if done right, can take on different poison elements that make it a hazard. So, I really hope that you guys enjoyed this particular piece of Asian Studies, Gunpowder and Fireworks, and how the fire drug was very crucial to early forms of the Sin, Sung, Mongols, and other empires of China that used it during this time. Remember, the fire drug, or we would call gunpowder or fireworks today, we might look at it as all, but remember the advances that we have and people that use it fanatize the mind and how we cultivate the use of it. Because right now, the use of gunpowder in most vital forms is solely warfare and firework entertainment with big bangs in the sky. Those two uses, and rockets, for example, really propel the force behind combustion and weapons later after the fact. So much, in fact, that gunpowder influenced devices such as nuclear bombs to be a caliber so much higher than the basic gunpowder that was discovered, with charcoal, sulfur, and nitrate or saltpeter, particularly potassium nitrate being the best saltpeter that you can use. So, just remember, gun is not the enemy. Gunpowder and fireworks have interesting uses that doesn't have to be violent. So just remember, how you use an invention is up to the beholder using it. It's not the invention itself that's the weapon, but it's how you use it. If you use it in a destructive way, it's a weapon. If you use it in a non-destructive way and have another use, then always remember that's how you can cultivate the use of the invention to the benefit of the discovery associated for that another use. So, When you take something and transform a different perspective to use that particular invention, you take it and apply a new discovery to the invention itself. So, as gunpowder and fireworks continue to be in awe of the combustion and mystical fire that brings, just remember fire is just as destructive as beautiful, but also life before your eyes. It's dangerous. It serves as a reminder that sometimes things should not be messed with, but messed with anyway because of human curiosity. And fire is one of those things. It is a huge evolutionary trait that integrates so much of the process of metal crafting, industrial revolution, food production, cooking, thermal energy of plants, that it skies the limits in applications, and gunpowder and fireworks is just one of those ways in which Chinese took it upon themselves to make it a reality. Guys, thank you so much for staying tuned to Asian Studies, Gunpowder and Fireworks. It was a very fun discussion. Hope you guys enjoyed it. And with that, always remember, guns not the enemy. Fireworks are always amazing to watch, but it takes a lot of time and effort to plan those events. So don't do it at home. Let the professionals do it for you so you can enjoy the show and not have to worry about casualties along the way. Thank you so much and enjoy.
This concludes another episode of MC Anime Podcast. MC Anime Podcast is available on podcast directories like Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and YouTube. We also have our website at mcanimepodcast.com. If you want to directly support us, then follow Patreon blog MC Anime. Finally, if you want services for hire, then we're available on Fiverr for audio and video production, graphic design, idea consulting, and blog and article writing.